Hi, good evening. My name is Miss A, and welcome to the National Council of Negro Women, Ruth Jones McClendon's section Storytime. As you know, this month is Women's History Month, and today we'll be reading about a famous African American woman by the name of Mary McLeod Bethune. She was our founder of the National Council of Negro Women. This story is entitled Woman of Courage, and it's by Patricia and Fredrick McKissack. Shall we get started? Chapter 1. I Will Read. Mary Jane McLeod grew up in this log cabin in Maysville, South Carolina. It was the summer of 1875. Patsy and Sam McLeod's 15th child was born. Her name was Mary Jane McLeod. It was a happy time for the family. Patsy and Sam had been slaves. Mary Jane was their first child born free. That made Mary Jane McLeod special. Mary Jane grew up in a large and loving family in Maysville, South Carolina. She rode Old Bush, the family mule, to the fields. She picked cotton along with her brothers and sisters on her father's farm. One day, Mary Jane went with her mother to a large house. Her mother washed and ironed for the people who lived there. Mary Jane had never been in such a big house. A young girl who lived there showed Mary Jane around. There was a book on the table. Mary Jane opened it. Suddenly, the girl took it away, saying, "Put that book down. You can't read it anyway." Mary Jane was surprised and hurt. True, she couldn't read. But why did picking up the book make the other girls so angry? The McLeods had a Bible. Nobody could read it. That night, Mary Jane held the book in her hand. "I will read," she said. "God willing, I will read." As a young girl, Mary Jane decided that she would learn how to read. Chapter 2. School Days. One day, Miss Emma Wilson came to Maysville. She told Sam and Patsy about the school she was starting. Would they send Mary Jane to school? Sam didn't think so. He needed everybody to help in the fields. Mary Jane prayed softly. Patsy spoke to Sam alone. At last, Sam gave in. Mary Jane could go to school. Mary Jane's brothers and sisters were disappointed. Why couldn't she read after the first day in school? It took time. Before long, Mary Jane did learn how to read and write. On one special night, she read the Bible to her mother and father. They were so proud. Miss Wilson's school went to the 6th grade. A kind woman paid for Mary Jane to go to Scotia Seminary in Concord, North Carolina. So in 1887, Mary Jane went away to school. As a young woman, Mary Jane wanted to teach and help others. She was just 12 years old. It was so lonely at first. She missed her family very much. 7 years later, Mary finished Scotia. Then she went to Moody Bible College in Chicago. Mary Jane McLeod was ready to start her life's work. But what would that be? She wondered. Chapter 3. A Dream and $1.50. Mary wanted to teach in Africa. Instead, she took a teaching job in Georgia. Good teachers were needed there. Mary met Albertus Bethune. He was a teacher too. He made her laugh. They were happy together. In 1898, Mary and Albertus married. A year later, their son was born. His name was Albert McLeod Bethune. Everyone called him Bert. Mrs. Bethune had heard that there was no school for black children in Daytona Beach, Florida. Mrs. Bethune went there. "I want to start a school for Negro girls," she said. All she had was $1.50. Some people laughed. Others helped. Mrs. Bethune would not give up on her dream. First, she rented a small house. She found writing paper in the trash. She had to use boxes for desks and coal for pencils. It was a poor beginning. Mrs. Bethune worked hard to start a school for black girls. Here she stands with her students. But on October the 3rd, 1904, Mrs. Bethune opened her school. She had 5 students. By 1905, the school had 100 students and 3 teachers. Next, she bought land that had been the city trash dump. That is where she would build her school. Some people laughed, but others helped. Rich, important people gave money to help build her school, and a hospital too. The first building for the school was finished in 1906. It was called Faith Hall because Faith had built it. Mrs. Bethune was a good speaker. She spoke at churches and schools all over the country. Chapter 4. The Black Rose. In 1923, Mrs. Bethune's school joined with Cookman, an all-boys school. Bethune-Cookman became a grade school, high school, and college. Boys and girls went to school together. Mrs. Bethune was the school's first president, but to her students she was always just Mother Dear. Another name for Mrs. Bethune was the Black Rose. This is how she got that name. Mrs. Bethune spoke all over the country. One idea she talked about was a big people garden. She said that people are like flowers. They live together in the world just as flowers grow in a garden. Red, yellow, small, tall, all growing together. They are all different, but each one is lovely. Mrs. Bethune dreamed of a people garden where everyone could live in peace. Once, a child said to Mrs. Bethune that blacks couldn't live in the people garden. There were no black flowers. This made Mrs. Bethune feel sad. Just because you have not seen a thing doesn't mean it doesn't exist, she always said. Years later, she got a wonderful surprise. While in the country of Holland, Mrs. Bethune was given bulbs of black tulips, the first black flower. And in Switzerland, Mrs. Bethune was shown the black rose. This made her very happy. She ordered 72 black rose bushes. They were planted at Bethune-Cookman College. She also had black tulips planted at the entrance of her school. Chapter 5. From Cotton Fields to the White House. In 1932, Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected President of the United States. The President asked Mrs. Bethune to serve in the National Youth Administration, NYA. This organization helped people ages 16 to 24 find part-time jobs. Mrs. Bethune was the first African-American woman to hold a job that high in the government. It was an honor. Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt was the president's wife. She was a friend to Mrs. Bethune. At the time, some people didn't think that a black person should be invited to the White House. But the Roosevelts did. Mrs. Bethune was always welcome at the White House and in the Oval Office, too. As a teacher and a leader, Mrs. Bethune spent her life helping young people. Once Mrs. Bethune went to see the president. "It is good to see you," he said. "I don't know why," Mrs. Bethune replied. "I'm always asking for something." "Yes," said the president, "but you never ask for yourself." It was true. Mrs. Bethune worked hard in the NYA. She tried to help young students find work so they could go to school. On April 25th, 1945, Mrs. Bethune took part in founding of the United Nations. Countries from all over the world agreed to work together for peace. Mrs. Bethune lived the rest of her life at Bethune-Cookman College. There she died of a heart attack on May 18, 1955. The school that Mary McLeod Bethune started with $1.50 is still in Daytona Beach. It helps prove that hard work can make dreams come true. I hope that you've learned something today about our national founder of the National Council of Negro Women, Incorporated, Mrs. Mary McLeod Bethune. She is a national treasure, a hero, a woman who made history and made many things possible in this country. Join us again for the rest of the month, where you'll be hearing more empowering stories about women in history. Until next time, I'm Miss A. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.